I said I would tell you a little bit more about the rent and mortgage. Let me do this slide just so you have a sense of what's there. This will be important for a lot of working people who are unable to get back to their work. I'm thinking, Adriana, of the many people at the IAT in, for example, convention services, the folks who are not going back to work, folks who work in live theater, not going back to work.
They got affected really badly.
Exactly. They're not making anything, and they can really get into trouble just trying to hang on to their homes or stay in their rental places. So there's 22 billion for emergency rental assistance. There was 25 billion put out there in December for it, another 22 billion. If this is, again, one of these benefits we have to know about, because if people don't know about it, they're not going to apply for it. They're just going to get evicted. But what happens is, and it's complicated, if your income is no more than 80% of the area median, and at least one person in the home is at risk of homelessness, and at least one is qualified for unemployment benefits or suffered COVID-related hardship, you're entitled to get help, rental assistance to keep you in the house with a roof over your head. There's also $10 billion to help people who are going to be foreclosed on, who can't pay their basic utilities. We don't have rules and regulations yet. We don't know who's going to be eligible for it or how they apply for it. In addition, there's $5 billion more in Section 8 housing vouchers. So folks who depend on Section 8 housing, here's another $5 billion so you don't get tossed out of your Section 8 housing. And then another $5 billion to help homeless across the country, the homeless programs. That is simplified, okay? I've tried to do it quickly, succinctly. There's much more to it, but you can see this cornucopia. It's just this flow of cash to the folks who need it the most. It's not top down to employers. This stuff is bottom up to working people. That's what this law is about. I've tried to just kind of boom, 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 show it to you. Now I want to talk about healthcare and pensions, of critical importance to union people in particular, because after all, we really are the ones who invented employer-related healthcare and fought for it. We invented employer-related pensions and fought for it. So these are incredibly important to working people and to the unions. This one, I'm not going to get down into the fuzzy details. It's really confusing. It's quite difficult. The rules and regs are pouring out now on this one, and we don't know quite how it works, but we're all figuring it out. Basically, here's what's happening. There's going to be free COBRA coverage, free for 6 months, April through September of this year. Workers who qualify for COBRA, who otherwise qualify for COBRA, can have 6 months of it for free from their healthcare plans. Now, some of them have employer plans, some of them have our union Taft-Hartley plans. Whichever it is, if they're in a group health plan, they're going to be entitled to 6 months of free COBRA if they're COBRA qualified. And then the government, the feds, are going to pay all that money, 100% of it, back to the employer or to the health plan, whichever one paid for it, okay? Now, here's how it works. You're eligible, a worker is eligible for COBRA coverage if they suffered an involuntary loss of their job or a loss of substantial number of hours. In other words, if people were laid off because of COVID is really what they're trying to address, right? The massive millions of people who had healthcare coverage, but lost it because they were laid off and didn't have the hours to work to keep getting healthcare. If any part, you're usually entitled when you get laid off to 18 months, you can go buy the healthcare from your union plan, your employer plan. You have to pay full price plus 2% administrative. It's too expensive for most workers to do. And you're entitled to do it for 18 months. So now, if any part of your 18 months that you're entitled to falls between April and September, you can apply and get free COBRA, okay? Even if the first time you were offered it, you were laid off, let's say last March or April when COVID hit, and the health plan sent you this notice that says, here, you can buy COBRA. And you said, yeah, great, I can pay, $500, $1,000, or $1,500 a month. I can't afford it. And you said, nope, no thanks. Even those who rejected are entitled to now get back on. And if you think about it, 18 months, if you were laid off in November 2019, your 18th month is April of 2021. So if you were laid off way back in November 2019 before COVID, you're entitled to 1 month of free coverage. If you're laid off, this thing is really to help those people who are laid off because of COVID, right? March, April, May of last year, they're going to, if they apply, get 6 months of full COBRA coverage, okay? Now, in order to get it, you can't be eligible to be covered by another plan, you know, your spouse's plan or whatever, and you can't be eligible for Medicare. How are they going to check that? When a worker applies for the free COBRA, they check a box saying, I can't get Medicare, I can't get it from my spouse, and they'll be entitled to this free COBRA coverage, okay? That one is huge. There's a lot more detail to it, but you can see how important that is to our folks, and our healthcare plans right now are sending notices to every worker who's been laid off since November 2019 saying, hey, you may be eligible for free COBRA. Please fill in this form, get it back to us. Okay, so we have to help workers work their way through that. In particular, I'm working now with several unions where their membership is predominantly Spanish speaking. So we're getting this stuff translated into Spanish. We're trying to call people on the phone to say, hey, don't pass this up. Okay, Obamacare. Big news about Obamacare, okay? First, quick review, okay, about the basics on Obamacare. For citizens, not undocumented, because this is a federal program. If your employer does not provide medical benefits, that means part-time workers, temps, early retirees, a lot of people that employers don't have to provide it for, you're entitled to Obamacare. And how much you pay for it is keyed to the federal poverty level, which right now is about a little under, you can see, $13,000 a year. If you make below 138% of the federal poverty level, you're entitled to free Medicaid. Okay, so you can see that number, if you take 138%, it's about 16 grand a year. If you make less than that, less than about 31 grand for a family of four. Free Medicaid, except the Confederacy, those states and a few oddballs who are thrown in like Wisconsin and South Dakota, you can't get the free Medicaid. But otherwise, in the other 38 states, free Medicaid. Now, up until now, there's been no access to the Obamacare exchanges if you made more than 400% of the federal poverty level. In other words, if you made more than about $51,000 a year, you couldn't use the exchange. You just had to go out and buy your own private policy. And there are tax credits, right? And when you go to the exchange, so then if you have to buy it, your employer, you have to copay. You can't be required to pay more than 8.5% of your income. And again, I say no access for the undocumented, but that's the way Obamacare has operated up to now. Now, let me show you the changes, okay? Number one, anybody can go to the exchanges and buy the healthcare plans that are available there. And you get tax credits on the front end to help with your premiums, subsidies to help with your copays on the other end to make your healthcare much less expensive. Now, you might say, well, wait a minute, if anybody can go, are you telling me people who make 400 grand or 500 grand a year can now buy cheaper healthcare? No, because you can charge them up to 8.5% of their income. And that's going to be way more than what they could pay elsewhere for their own private policy. So this isn't going to be overloaded with a lot of rich folk, but it is going to mean people make $60,000, $70,000, $80,000 a year and are trying to support a family. They can go and get the deals, the tax credits and the subsidies at the exchanges. But here's the big news, and I put it in bright red. I mean, this is really important if we can just get the word out there. You can have zero premium cost. It costs you nothing per month for a silver 70-30 plan at the exchange if you're unemployment, getting unemployment benefits, or you make less than 150% of the federal poverty level, less than $19,320 a year. Now, I want to focus on that. Free health care, a totally free health care plan from the exchanges, okay, from the marketplaces that have been set up in, I guess 38 states, 12 of them you have to use the federal exchange. The enrollment period has been extended so you can get either less expensive or free through August 15, 2021. So there's a big open enrollment period. And let's talk electoral politics. This low-cost Obamacare or free Obamacare is extended to December 31st, 2022. Think about that November 2022 election. there are going to be several million people who are going to vote. Do I want to keep my cheap or free Obamacare or not? Your choice. You want to not have health care? Okay, that's all right. Just vote for the folks who want to destroy the Affordable Care Act. But this is so important that we get this word out. I read, I think last week, when they first extended the open enrollment period, there was something like 250 to 300,000 people who had already applied in the new open enrollment period. The hope is, the expectation is 2 to 3 million people are going to take advantage of this, but they'll only do it if we get the word out. Okay. Now, this gives you a little better sense of how this works. The column on the right-hand side is the one that matters. If you make up to 150% of federal poverty level, you pay 0%, right, of your income. But then you can see, as your income goes up, you pay a little more, a little more, a little more. If you make over 400%, you're going to have to pay 8.5% of your income. So wealthy folks won't do it. But this is going to open it up for a lot of what we call the middle class today. Okay. We're going to turn from healthcare now. The hits just keep on coming. We're going to turn next to the defined benefit pension plan, our union plans that have been in big, big trouble, the ones that we're reading about, like the Teamster Central State Fund, that are deeply, deeply underfunded. This law, there were all kinds of proposals that were floating. If you follow this stuff, there was something called the Butch-Lewis Act and 32 variations on it. This law said, let's skip all that baloney. We're just going to take $86 billion. We're going to put it in the Pension Benefit Guaranty Corporation, what's called the PBGC. And the PBGC, which is a private public insurance company, is going to basically feed this money to plans that need it the most. Now, I'm not going to get into a lot of the details here. I don't think it makes sense on a Saturday morning to really get down to the nitty-gritty. But basically what it's saying is all those funds that have been seriously underfunded, like the Teamster Central State, Jimmy Hoffa's big plan in the Midwest, we're going to give them enough money, okay, so that, and we think it's about 185 to 260 Taft-Hartley plans, a couple hundred of them, okay? We're going to give them enough money so that they can pay full pensions through the year 2051. And those ones that had to reduce pensions, like the Teamster Central State, they're going to reimburse people going back as far as 6 years, full pensions, because they were cut to keep them alive longer. Teamster Central State was going to disappear as of 2025. This is going to keep it alive until 2051. Now there's going to be close oversight by the PBGC. The funds are going to have to set this money aside separately. They're going to have to put it in certain kinds of investment grade bonds, and they're going to have to do high quality investments. The contribution rates that are collected from employers, all that's going to be overseen by the PBGC. The regs are going to be so long, so detailed, so impossible to read. But bottom line, the pension plans, the union ones we thought were going to die and leave people with no pensions at all, the money is going to be there to pay people pensions for, as you can see, from basically 2021 to 2051, the next 30 years. Part of the way that'll be paid, PBGC premiums are going to go up. Every pension fund will have to pay $52 per head. Sometimes we call it $52 per belly button in the business, starting in 2031. But let me put it this way. Any Teamster in the Midwest, in states like Indiana, in Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, Michigan, Ohio, you know I'm talking about swing states. Any Teamster in those states who doesn't know the reason that he's getting his pension is because of this law needs to be educated, okay? Critically important, not accidental. I'm not going into the weeds. We're just going to skip that one Saturday morning. Let's go now. We've talked about individual workers, cash in their pockets. Then we talked about money for healthcare and pension. Now I'm going to talk about money that's going to entities, institutions, or various sectors of the economy, okay? This is going to be our basically third and final part. First of all, aid for unions themselves in the form of employee. Oops, that slide is wrong. It shouldn't say employer retention credits. It should say employee retention credits. These are extended. They were already in place. They're extended through 2021, and they go up to $14,000 per employee. Let me tell you what this is about, okay? if you're union or if you're representing people at a small business, okay, if their money, if their income declined 20% when you compare their gross receipts for the first 2 quarters of this year with the first 2 quarters of 2019, and they have less than 500 employees, they're going to be entitled to these retention credits. Here's how it works. So you look at your union, you say, hey, did the dues we collect in the first quarter of this year, is it more than 20% down from the first quarter of 2019? Now, 2019 was a normal year, right? We're not looking at 2020. We go back to that normal year. If you have a decline in 20%, or you're talking about small employers whose gross receipts went down, less than 500 employees, not so small really, okay? If you qualify, if you had that 20% or more decline, you can recover up to $7,000 per employee for each person you keep employed in the first 2 quarters of 2021. 7,000 for the first quarter of 2021, 7,000 for the second quarter. The way that they compute these numbers, how do you figure out how much you're entitled to? They say, okay, you can get up to 70% of the wages and healthcare you paid for a worker in the first quarter, up to $10,000. So that's where you end up with, you can get as much as $7,000. You get 70% of whatever you paid an employee during the first quarter of 2021 or the second quarter. And then they then extended that and they said, we're going to do the same thing for the third and the fourth quarters of 2021. Now, what this boils down to, the essential point here is that employers, smaller employers who are in trouble because their income is down more than 20%, can keep people employed and take tax credits for keeping them on the payroll up to $7,000 per person. So we have to know that, and I've worked with a lot of unions now trying to figure out, okay, how much did your receipts go down from 2019 first quarter? And how much are you paying your employees? Is it up to $10,000 per quarter? And 70% of what you're paying them up to 10,000, you're entitled to 7,000, so blah, 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 blah. What I'm really saying is if you work through these computations, what we're really talking about is there's money here for unions, okay? As well as the small employers who by and large may not know about this. So it's a union responsibility, not only to help their own unions, but also to the small employers where they have unionized workforce, going to them and saying, hey, here's a way that you can keep some of our people employed and get some tax credits for it, okay? You can look at this. Lou, I'm gonna give you this whole PowerPoint, and then if anybody wants it, they can get it from you. So I'm not gonna spend a lot of time on this chart, but it really spells out what I'm sure sounds like gobbledygook. Let me tell you quite frankly, I haven't said this, so let me say it at this point. I can't keep all these dates and numbers in my head. Now, admittedly, it's an old head and it's chock full of irrelevancies anyway. But anybody who listens to this and thinks they now know it all, you haven't been listening carefully enough. If you're listening carefully, it should be discombobulated as can be at this point, because there's so many different dates, so many different numbers. The idea is just get a taste of what's there, then you can get the PowerPoint and get the details so you can help workers, okay? Now, there's also, we're going to start moving pretty quickly for small businesses and for unions, up to $15 billion, billion here, billion there, pretty much soon you're talking real money, for quick emergency grants through what are called economic injury disaster loans, $7.25 billion for the Paycheck Protection Program, and now nonprofits like unions can apply for the Paycheck Protection Program. It's another way for unions to get help from the government in the form of tax credits or tax refunds to help pay workers to stay on the union payroll. Okay, but this time, remember last time, Paycheck Protection was, I think, north of 250 billion. So it was big money to big companies. Not that much in Paycheck Protection this time. Most of the money is going directly to workers, not down through Paycheck Protection. Then there is a special $28.6 billion for small restaurants and bars, okay? Including, of that 28.6, $5 billion is just for restaurants, bars with less than $500,000 annual revenue in 2019. In other words, there's recognition that, boy, nobody has been hit. Well, I shouldn't say nobody, but few have been hit as heavily as restaurants and bars by COVID, all being shut down and unable to do business except takeout and sometimes outdoors. So there's special money to help them get through. For workplace safety, $200 million going to the Department of Labor for pandemic-related protection program. $100 million will go to OSHA, so OSHA can actually start enforcing occupational safety and health laws. You may or may not know that during the Trump administration, OSHA became a joke, worse than a joke. It became a plague. You know, we have COVID running wild through, you know, slaughterhouses, and OSHA can't come up with any standards to apply. Some of this money is going to be used particularly in high-risk sectors, meat processing, healthcare, prisons, agriculture, so that OSHA can get out there, promulgate standards, and enforce them to make sure that workers aren't being plagued by huge outbreaks in these kinds of industries. Okay. There's also a lot of money for state and local governments, $350 billion to address the negative economic impacts of COVID-19, to replace the revenues, you know, that they lost by covering for COVID, delayed revenues, the fact that they're not getting the taxes they usually get. It's not for public pension contributions, can't go there. But any of you who work with public sector employees, you can now go to charts. They're out there online now and see exactly how much your county is going to get, your state is going to get, your city is going to get. And you can go to the employers and say, let's bargain about what you do with that money, because it's supposed to help, you know, your workers, your workplace. More on the public sector, $30 billion, especially for transit agencies, so that drivers, mechanics on, you know, Metro or BART, depending where you live, so we can keep those folks employed. Direct purchase of PPE, personal protection equipment for workers who are out there on public transit routes. $1.7 billion, so that Amtrak can begin to beef up and get its routes going again and bring back its workers. $50 billion, this is one's interesting. They tucked this one in there for FEMA, Disaster Relief Fund. In other words, there's also a little taste of climate change being addressed by the federal government, because they know there's going to be, you know, there's going to be fires, there's going to be floods, hurricanes, tornadoes, more than ever before. So they tucked in $50 billion for FEMA because they know we're going to need it. $8 billion especially for airports, so the airport workers can stay employed during this time of low. And then you notice $15 billion, they say, for wages and benefits of airline employees. Okay, so now we're talking all the folks who work for the airlines, and $3 billion for, quote, airplane manufacturer payroll support. Translation, so Boeing can keep its workers employed during this time when airlines and airplane manufacturing are still in a lot of trouble. Education, $125 billion to help kindergarten through 12th grade reopen, so they can revise their heating, ventilation, air conditioning, so they can revise their and buy as much PPE as they need, so they have the money so that schools get open. There's an understanding, the Biden-Harris administration now, schools have got to reopen. We have to do whatever's necessary to get kids back in school. A, for their parents, so that they don't have to live with them 24/7, but B, and even more important, for the kids. To miss a year of socialization is going to, you know, as well as education, it's going to cost kids a lot, I think, for a while. $40 billion is going to go to higher education. Okay, we're talking junior colleges, community colleges, college and universities. At least half of that $40 billion is to go to emergency financial aid grants to students. And student loan forgiveness will not be taxed. I'm not going to get into that. It's not student loan forgiveness. It's just certain forgiveness. If you get a break, you don't get taxed on the break. So that's just a small first step with respect to student loans. Then for essential workers, first responders, teachers, drivers, $7.6 billion. I put it in red. This one kind of stopped me short. I read right past the first time and said, wait a minute, are you serious? And I went back. They're going to hire 100,000 full-time public health employees in America. Federal money is going to pay for 100,000 more public health workers. Cosmic. $46 billion for testing, contract tracing, PPE purchases. In other words, a lot of money to continue to stop COVID. $20 billion, as you know, for Vaccine Distribution Administration. We now believe by midsummer, by July 4th, we're looking for most of America to be vaccinated. And right now, even with the holdup on J&J, we're on schedule. It's going to happen. There's so much more in this law, okay? I know that by this time, look, when I learned to do jury trials, I was told by the people who taught me, you have to do your heaviest cross-examination in the first 10 minutes, because that's what our attention span is. If you watch TED Talks, they're about 10 or 12 minutes, because that's our attention span. If you watch YouTubes, people watch not more than 10 to 12 minutes. So I know, the only reason I'm still with it is because I have to talk it. I know you've come and you've gone, you've been in, you've been out. That's the way it works. So I'm just going to say, with respect to the rest, rather than continuing to crank through it, let me just say, there's a lot of money to purchase and distribute vaccine. There's a lot of money for the Veterans Administration so that they can help veterans with their health care. And particularly, they're waiving all co-pays for veterans for their medical treatment. There's funding for an enhanced, what they call the earned income tax credit for low-income people. It's been tripled. There's funding for family farms. There's $5 billion for farms owned by people of color. What we're really talking about is all the Black farmers throughout the South. Special money so they can keep their farms. There's funding for community healthcare centers, funding for community mental health services, funding to, check this one out, strengthen cybersecurity. It goes on and on. This law is really, I hope you'll agree with me, or at least it gives you some food for thought. This really may be what I think it is, the biggest piece of social policy legislation since the New Deal, and more to come. Now, what do we do next? Number one, you got to learn this stuff. I really think, everybody I talk to, I say, look, unfortunately, by virtue of coming here, you haven't relieved yourself of a responsibility. You've added one onto your own shoulders. Now that you know about this, you've got to make sure you educate yourself, educate others, and figure out how we can all access these benefits. I invite you to my firm's website, www.unioncouncil.net. We have a Zoom video recording of this talk by me. We have the PowerPoint is up there. We have talks about basically every law that's coming down. You can also take a look. We have a video. I did one on new California workplace laws. Did that one about 6 months ago when legislature closed, and I think it was June last summer. Lots of new laws to help working people. You can look at that one. But this in particular, we've got to use this law. We've got to understand it, A, to get benefits for ourselves and the workers we know. B, it gives us huge bargaining opportunities with employers, because so much of this touches on wages, hours, terms, and conditions of employment. We can make demands to bargain about what they're going to do with all this money. And I hope we can use it to organize the unorganized. I'm not sure unions have, frankly, the bandwidth. People are so exhausted now. I just don't know. But if folks have the bandwidth, unions can go out to the unorganized and say, we're going to help you get the child care money, the child weekly checks, make sure they get the $1,400 checks, help you get your unemployment benefits, help you get your free Obamacare. If we can go out and help people get that, I think it's a great opportunity to organize them into unions. And with that, I thank you for all your attention. We've been going for a while. Tell you what, Lou, if you'd like, I'm going to open the chat box. Maybe there are some questions there. Let me see. Can I get the PowerPoint at your email? No.
Questions already for you. If we could share your PowerPoint or how to get to it.
Sure.
You just mentioned that it was on your website.
Yeah, it's at the website. You can get the PowerPoint as well as a recording of this at www.unioncouncil.net. That'll take Lou off the hook, Adriana. I won't even have to send it to him and make him responsible. Yeah, he's
thumbs up from Lou right there.
He's way too busy combing his hair and changing his glasses. He's got a lot of stuff to do.
Well, but thank you. Yeah, so for those callers that are on the phone, please use your *9 button to raise your hand. And for those that are here on your smart devices, please use the reaction button. There should be a tab that says raise your hand right there immediately. So we can go to questions as well in the chat, of course. And I hope you enjoyed this session this far.
Okay. So, Adriana, you want me to handle the questions? You want to take them?
Let's see. Does anybody have any questions for Mr. Sokol?
Nadine has a question. Nadine, why don't you turn on your sound and let it rip?
first. Good afternoon.